Through the generous contribution of Dr. Lewis's family, we're very fortunate to be able to share with you these timeless recordings of Dr. M. W. Lewis, a self-realized American yogi. Dr. Lewis was Paramahansa Yogananda's first American disciple and dearest personal friend. The wisdom Dr. Lewis imparts through these teachings will give you a dynamic and practical insight into the ancient science of yoga as taught by Paramahansa Yogananda. This lecture's title is God's Number One Enemy, Ego, and was delivered in San Diego, California on June 27, 1954.
Subject this morning, God's, we might add, number one enemy, ego. Some people wonder what the ego is. I can give you one simple rule whereby you can know whether you are still in ego consciousness. If anyone can hurt you by telling you anything about yourself or your friend, and you feel it and are hurt by it, you are still in ego consciousness. Remember that now. Next time you feel yourself getting hot under the collar, or you feel yourself flushing, say, "Get down, ego. I am above that." And that is a fact. You will find by self-discipline and following the techniques of self-realization that you will reach a point of oneness with spiritual consciousness wherein no one or no condition can hurt you at all. Why should it? You are not that ego. The ego is the soul attached to the body, pseudo-self. The spirit is far above likes and dislikes. And so let us understand first about this number one enemy of God. Now the soul is attached to the body and becomes the ego. And that ego is God's number one enemy because it prevents us from knowing and realizing our oneness with Him. It prevents us from realizing our heritage, the conscious realization that we are a son or daughter of God. And so, ego is the enemy because it keeps us in ignorance. And ignorance is the greatest sin because it prevents us from consummating our heritage, a true child of God, the realization that we are a true child of God. And so, the soul attached to the physical vehicle, that's all, is the body. And attachment to that body is the ego. And so, the ego, being attached to the body, is subject to all the imperfections of the body, and especially the fact that the body changes and passes away and is non-existent after a while. That's the greatest sin, don't you see? Because then you resolve yourself into nothingness. So, it is a good subject. God's enemy, number one enemy, is ego. Now the Master has said, if you still the physical breath, if you still the astral breath, if you still the mental breath, in other words, if you quiet the movement of outward consciousness, what you have left is God. So, it shows that the subject of the physical, astral, and mental breath is this ego. That's the subject. And so by removing that subject, or stilling the movements which are watched over and guided by that subject ego, by doing that, then you eliminate the ego and allow the perception of God to be fulfilled. He is there in us. The Master has often said, God is in each one of us. We should feel that instead of feeling a separateness from Him. Any aspect of God that you can contact, as the light at this point, or the sound of the cosmic sound, or the love in the heart, the minute you have it, seize it. That's far above ego consciousness to say, Father, I have Thee. How can the ego exist? It cannot. And so this ego really is an enemy of God. Something that prevents us from knowing Him naturally stands in the way. And that which stands in the way is the greatest enemy, because it prevents us from knowing our kinship with our Father. Now, God doesn't think too much is too well. He doesn't have much use for ego-conscious people. He doesn't think very much of them. You say, how do you know? Well, it's simple. In the Bible, in Matthew, the 11th chapter, 25th verse, we wouldn't have these words if God thought very much of those who are puffed up in ego consciousness and have a swelled head, as we say. He doesn't like them very much, for He says in that scripture, Jesus says, Thou dost not reveal Thyself